companies are trying to do what we do with AI. What's the thing that a company overestimates about what you do? I said, what they overestimate? They overestimate that we find the best talent. Maybe I'll get 10% more people to answer than they will, right? Because of the people I know. You, me, everybody, the company, we have access to 90% of the same people with LinkedIn. So identification is not the issue. I don't find that person. Denise doesn't find that person. Denise qualifies them. Gets a relationship with that person. Denise understands their drivers. She understands their personality, what company's gonna work. She understands their hot buttons on their compensation, on their hybrid, their ability to hybrid, their ability not to be hybrid, all that stuff. So when you're using AI to identify the same people Denise is gonna call, and then I call it the work in the middle. They find the person up front, and then at the end, they think dropping an offer in their lap is going to solve that problem. They didn't do any of the work in the middle. When they get 4 offers turned down, they're wondering, what did I do wrong? You didn't do any of the work in the middle. So we don't find the best person. We find the person that's going to work, because as we're talking about AI and we're talking about talent acquisition and we're talking about what you and I do,
Hi there, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I am your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Mr. Steve Swan from the Swan Group. He is the CEO in New Jersey. Welcome, Steve. Welcome from the other side of the country.
Denise, thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. This is great. You've got a better latitude than me, especially right now, right? From a weather perspective.
I know, but you'll have a white Christmas. That's kind of,
Well, we'll see. They say we're gonna get more snow this year. Can't be less than we had last year, so
yeah, you never know. Mother Nature has the last word.
yes. Every time, right?
Well, Steve and I met last week and we were having an interesting conversation. And so we wanted to put it on, record it and talk about the rise of the bionic employee. Before we even jump in, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure, sure. So Steve Swan run the Swan Group. We place IT, senior level IT folks in the biotech and pharmaceutical world. I got into this business 26 years ago, took over from my mother, Barbara, where she left off, and been doing that ever since. So that's real quick snapshot of who I am.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your rise of the bionic employee.
So when I talk about the bionic employee, so I mean, technology, as we all know, has evolved in a big way, right? So when I started doing this right around, let's just for round numbers, let's call it 2000. It was kind of like anything technology, and there were some corporate functions and some things where there was IT and technology. Now it's kind of be careful what you wish for, because, like you just said, IT touches everything. And so, in the recent past, I have a podcast, my own podcast, and I talk to IT leaders within biotech and pharma, and all they want to talk about is AI. And what they've been talking about recently is the rise of the bionic employee, right? Like you just mentioned. And what they mean by that and what they're saying is they're talking about AI and how AI is going to make particular employees, for lack of a better term, bionic. So it's going to make them faster, better, smarter at what they do. So take the take the software developer, for example, right? So the software developer who right now has to sit down and code and write all their code with everything that they have to do. Then they have to check it, then they have to review it to make sure it works, and so on and so forth. Well, now AI can actually write that code. What they have to do, though, as an employee, is they still have to know how to code. You can't just be some Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street that's gonna do this, because you have to check it, right? I mean, we've all heard that we can't totally trust AI to do everything for us, but it's gonna do the mundane part of basically writing the long code that they have to deal with. They gotta review the code, right? Then they have to understand the architecture of the whole company, the technical architecture and how that's gonna fit in. But most importantly, they have to understand what the business folks, whether they're building something for finance or whether they're building something for supply chain or sales or marketing or HR, whatever it is, they have to understand what it is that they're building. So what it's done and why they're bionic is because their now 8-hour day is probably a 13-hour day, but they're only going to work 8 hours because AI is going to write the code for them. It's going to shave off those several hours for their day, and then they can spend their time on that higher level stuff I was just chatting with you about, saying the code review, then the architecture, then working with the business. So that's kind of the, I mean, that's one example. There's several of them, but that's the rise of the bionic employee, and a lot of my, again, CIOs have been talking a lot about that.
That's amazing. Now, do you see IT roles expanding, even with the AI supported tools that they're using? And
Yeah, so so roles are expanding because, like I just said, it's giving them more hours in the day, right? So now they have time to actually sit down and understand what the folks in HR, legal, or finance, or whatever needs out of the system they're building. They have time to review some of the data. They can focus on the higher level tasks and things as opposed to doing the hands-on technical coding. As, again, they have to review it, but the roles are gonna expand, they're gonna become more in depth, and these folks are gonna become smarter, better, faster at everything they're doing because they're they're bionic now with their AI.
well, well, I guess, and for me, I mean, when I was talking about expansion, are there going to be additional? Do you see additional IT roles opening up as a result of this?
Um, I haven't seen that yet. There quite possibly could be, and I'm thinking about it right now as you're saying that. I think there probably could be because as we connect all of these different systems and as AI comes into play, we're going to need more folks to actually more folks here, right? To look at these things. I mean, we outsourced a lot. I think we over outsourced at least in our industry over the last bunch of years, and they're going to have to bring some of that back so that because the coding will be done here and not overseas, these folks will need to be here, more of them that are actually, I mean, you don't want to say they're doing the code, and they kind of are. AI is doing it, but they need to sit in front of the business because what I've seen in the real recent past are all my companies are looking to add a layer in IT that directly interacts with business, the business partners, business relationship managers, the folks that can really sit with business and understand what they need and what to build and how they're going to build it and what their strategy is and the roadmap and all that stuff. Right. So yes, I'm seeing right now there's a huge, huge push for those business relationship managers, business partners. So I see a lot of that coming in.
And you didn't have that, like, say, even a year ago.
No. Mm-mm.
That's amazing. I'm grateful for this conversation because we need some good news recordings for our community.
Well, but it's a tough ask of the typical IT employee because, well, I'll give you an example. I was in Boston last week, last week or the week before. I can't remember now. I did a roundtable with about 40 CIOs, and what we talked a lot about, what I talked about, was exactly that business partner role, and really being able to sit with business and help them to develop what they need so that we can then go back and build it. So from a business partner perspective, and they were kind of trying to wrap their heads around it and try and get used to that idea. They are seeing those roles. They need to somebody was just talking to me about putting together a white paper with them to graduating from operations from a tactical person to somebody that's actually adding that value, right? To turn in from a real technologist into somebody who's in with the business and an innovator like that. So it's a big ask because they're not used to doing that. They're used to having their defined task in front of them. Most IT folks, but a lot of them have been raised up the ranks. They're really good at what they do, but it doesn't mean they're great with the business. And now here we are being asked, if you will, to get in front of the business and help to define what they need or help to bring new technologies or what some would refer to as the art of the possible, right? So business, we could do this and that would help you get here or whatever. It's a big ask. And another guy, I did a podcast earlier today, and this guy was asking me to do some training sessions to help train people up to go from, he was calling it, what did he call it today? How to transform from an operator to an innovator. And he wants me to help him write a white paper, and then he wants me to give some training on that.
Good for you for landing in a space that's just so critical.
It's crazy.
Okay, 2 questions come up from what you're sharing with me.
Yeah.
1, you mentioned that people will be writing code more versus outsourcing it to other countries, they'll be writing code more here in the US. Talk about that for a minute. Why?
So, well, the reason why I think that's the case is because of AI, right? So, AI is actually writing the code, but the folks that are here need to know how to write the code. I'll give you an example. My daughter, she just got out of school, data science, knows how to code, Java, Python, yada, yada, yada. And she works at a firm and she didn't even know she was a Bionic employee because I used that term, and she's like, "What?" Um, I'm like, "Tell me what you're doing." So she's taking AI, she's using a particular language, having it write all her code. Now, but she has to know how to code, and she does. She had to review it. Maybe there were dashes or commas or something, right? Just make sure everything's right. But then she also has to be able to interact with the business. With the coders overseas, they don't do that. They don't interact with business. They're given a sheet of paper maybe with some specs on it and just said, build that. And then over here, we got to test it and go through it and do all that. Now, since it's Chat GPT doing what they're doing over there. So now that's going to come back here because that's effectively free for us. And so you got somebody that knows how to code, that understands how to review it, and can handle it, but then can integrate it with the systems that they have. That's where the architecture comes in. So that's why that's going to come back more so to hear another. Not that you ask, but I'm going to say it anyway. The other couple of areas that they talked about Bionic employees is in obviously customer service. We've all experienced that, right? That helping to route calls and stuff. And then another one is marketing communications, Marcom.
I did not know that about Marcom.
That's what they were saying, that it generates a lot of their content. Who knew?
Oh, that would. It sure would.
Who knew?
So the second question I have is the people that were reviewing the software before. So you had people in other countries writing code, sending it back here to the United States. The people here were reviewing it and then working with the business. So how has that role changed? How is that role changing then? Because it sounds like instead of the people overseas doing the code writing, now you've got AI doing it. But it sounds like the people who are on the front end are still doing the same job. How is that job changing?
They're doing the same job, and now they've added coding to their job, and the coding's done by AI. They're just doing code review.
And they
So
weren't doing code review before.
and they were probably doing code review before, but they were had to wait for somebody overseas to get it to them. Now they just
Oh, I
hit their
see.
butt. That's how that's how they're
So
bionic.
they're having yeah, I was gonna say, so they're having to actually spend a lot more time than really digging in and reviewing the code that's coming to them through AI.
Yeah, I don't think I bet they don't review it any more or any less than they did before. It's just that now it's being generated from their desktop as opposed to being sent to them from someone else's desktop overseas.
So the people then that are gonna be working on the business end, the front end, are these people who I mean, what would their roles have been called a year ago?
I mean, so back in the day, I mean, a million years ago when I started in this business, lots of those folks were business analysts.
Right. I remember
Um,
that. Mhm.
yeah, and then they got rid of them,
Yep.
and then they started bringing in whatever, trying to save money and how things the pendulum swings, right? So then they came back and the business said, okay, we need folks that can still bridge the gap between IT and business. So then some of them started getting called business relationship managers, right?
Ah.
BRMs,
Is
yeah,
that what
and
the new title will be, do you think?
well, some of them are still called that, but some folks make a big distinction between business relationship managers and business partners. Some folks say that the business relationship managers are strictly order takers and execution folks, and the business partner sits at the table, helps to develop the strategy, helps them understand the business. That is what they really need, what's IT capable of, the art of the possible. I say that for you. So yeah, the roles evolved, and I think it's more crucial because IT's more everywhere than it's ever been. But number two, we're spending more money on this stuff than we're spending on a lot of things. So the
Oh,
leaders in
let's talk
the
about
leaders in
that.
the the leaders in the companies are saying to themselves, we got to get more out of this. We got to get more bang for the buck because we spend X number of dollars on this system. Are we getting everything we can out of it? Let's get somebody to bridge that gap and we can really be more productive.
So how are tools changing? What tools are they using?
My companies will work with I'm trying to think of systems that every Salesforce.com, right? Or SAP, another big system, right? Right? They work with big systems. They work with others, but now we have different tools that can help them become more technical, right? So let's just say it's a lot. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a lot easier. You don't need developers to to change the system the way that you used to before, right? It's a lot easier for either the business side to do it or somebody who's less technical in IT to do it. Some of my companies, and again, talking about the swinging pendulum, have started to decentralize their IT organizations, and they're actually moving some of the technical jobs into the business, right? So those folks are doing their own technical work. Now, that presents its own problems, right? Because if something breaks and the business doesn't know how to handle it, they call up IT and say, hey, something's busted. Well, I don't own that. You guys do. So now we got a turf war going on there.
Is that why they're moving people then into the business from IT?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why. Yep, you
So
got
the
that.
roles, I mean, when we talk about the roles have changed, I mean, the roles in IT have changed frequently. Well, and the thing is when did a programmer analyst become a software developer? It was after the internet was developed, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean, but when you look at some of them still today, they are programmer analysts, right? That's kind of what the Bionic employee is.
I was just saying, are we going to go backwards again, like we're seeing with some of the other positions, where people will then become programmers now versus?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We will. It again depends when this
Wow,
keeps swinging.
that's
It just keeps going.
interesting.
We offshore, we onshore. I mean, it just keeps going back and forth. Like I was just talking about that business partner role. They used to be called business relationship managers. Maybe they're going to come back. I don't know. I always use them interchangeably, but that's not what you're supposed to do,
Well,
right?
and
So,
and business analyst was really big. I remember working for a data center company, and they had a need for business analysts. And I remember they were very specific, but they weren't developers. And I remember this one guy said, "Don't confuse this
no.
for a developer." He said, "Just think of it, we're the homework checkers."
Yes. Yeah. So what they do? So it's exactly what they do. So they would gather the requirements. They'd make sure that the business and the technical folks are speaking the same thing. They would write the specs up, and then they would test it. They would do quality checks on it for the business. So they would write up the test scripts and and make sure that it checks out and it works before it goes into production. So yeah, the business analysts run all that part of it. But and in my mind, when I talk to folks about the BRMs or the business partners, essentially, because again, those business analysts were between business and IT. Those business partners and business relationship managers are kind of business analysts on steroids with really big titles, because they're reporting right to the CIO. They're reporting right to real senior level folks. So they've got some weight, some gravitas internally where people will listen to them.
So let's talk about the roles that TA will be playing in this. Our audience is predominantly TA practitioners on one level or another. And I had a conversation earlier with another colleague talking about transferable skills. And I remember one woman I had trained many years ago, my friend Teresa, who had worked for me and I had trained her as a recruiter and she liked it. But then she got a contract job with a company, a bank in Florida. And I've mentioned her before because her story was unique at the time. Anyway, she was supporting their IT department as a recruiter, and she was working in their department a lot, working with their IT, yeah. Well, what was really interesting is she started becoming more interested in IT itself and what they were doing. So
Oh,
she
really?
wound up transitioning to IT from TA. Yeah,
Wow,
and
good
she
for
did really
her.
well with it and really loved it, and I don't know, I haven't connected with her in a long time to find out where she's at now, but it was an interesting transition. We talk about transferable skills with, I mean, people in TA, HR, but other departments as well. I mean, you were talking about Marcom a while ago and also IT. So let's talk about transferable skills from a TA perspective. Do you see people from other departments taking a shine to some of the IT roles now that they don't have to go and get a CS degree and they don't have to be a coder, so to speak, since they have AI in it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I do see it, right? So when we just were talking about the business relationship manager or the business partner, especially, right? Because if those folks aren't doing any coding, right? Those folks aren't even, they're not even doing they're not even the bionic employees. So they are bridging that gap. So if they have, obviously they have an idea what the business side's doing because they came from, let's say, talent acquisition or HR. And I see that as one of the big things that when someone gets involved with a business partner role, if they're working with HR, it's always around the ATS, so it's always about the recruitment or the onboarding, trying to automate or do whatever they gotta do. So, it would be a natural step or a natural progression, assuming one really gets in and understands what the systems are about. So, the person you were talking about, they knew the business, they got to know the technology. They'd probably be a great person to step up into one of those roles, BRM or business partner.
Well, there's a lot of recruiters who have been supporting IT technology for, I mean, or I should say IT for a long time and have learned some of. the inner machinations, if you would, of the IT departments that they're supporting. So it'd be interesting to know how. And this other person I spoke with earlier had also talked about TA operations. So TA operations and HRIS, those are two functions that would be very close kissing cousins of IT, correct?
Yeah. Well, HRIS, absolutely. Yeah. HRIS. I mean, it can be its own, sort of entity, but I've placed a lot of folks in HRIS and they sit in HR and they're doing their information systems work and they're just tackling all that for them. And again, it's got its own HR has always had its own kind of island, its own
Yeah.
flavor.
It
HRIS that
does.
is.
That
Yeah.
is kind of the operations side of HR, really. And I bet it connects to legal, finance, payroll. I mean, there's so many.
I have a company that came to me on it was earlier this week. Was it Monday? Anyway, they had me looking for their head of IT business partner for HR, legal, and finance.
Wow. So now what positions do you think are going to be opening up then, like say in 2026, that will support IT in the ways that you're discussing right now?
I don't think we're going to see a shortage of these business partner roles. I think that we've gotten way out over. So when I went up to Boston last week, they were saying to me, "Come with a subject," and I said, "Okay, here's my subject." I think we've gotten way out over our skis with artificial intelligence, with AI, just AI in general. I mean, it's got its spots, like we talked about, but then you also have some of the smaller organizations or some of the places focused on keeping the lights on, right? Keeping the technology working, making it reliable. In the middle of all that is the business value of IT. What's IT doing for business? How's IT improving our bottom line? How's it making us more productive, more efficient, bionic, if you will, right? And so that's where these business partners come in, and that's where these business relationship managers come in, where they can help make sense for both sides, both the business and IT, in order to help drive some efficiencies and some value to the business from IT to make them better, faster, smarter. So I think roles that are able to do that in any way, shape, or form are the big roles, and I'm seeing it. I've been seeing it. I've been seeing it in the recent past, and it's
That's great, though. It's great news. You're cracking open the toolbox, if you would, for all sorts of new discussions, new opportunities for people, especially with some of the conversations, because these are some of the harder conversations right now. Is what are we going to do with people whose roles are going to become obsolete? And there's going to be obsolete roles. People keep saying, "I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job." No, it depends on how you look at it. Perhaps your
it
role will
does.
become obsolete as it now, but put on your I love what Michael Goldberg said today, be creative in your own mind. Don't get so locked up with fear that you lose your own creativity and be able to connect what you've been doing with other opportunities inside of your organization that you can transition to.
Let's go back to what we said about the Bionic employee, right? Let's go back to that coder. Let's use her as an example. She's working with business. That's one thing she does. She's reviewing code and she's writing the code with the AI, right? So I th- in order to work with business, right? On the business side and understand what they want, it's not a small task what the business analyst did for years because when you sit down with somebody in the business, whether they're in manufacturing or whether they're in R&D, whatever they're in, they think they need X. So they're asking you for X. However, the real question is here or here, right? I mean, we're just human. So we don't know all the time. We think we know what we want or we think we know what's going to work for us. So we structure our question in such a way that it's going to get the answer that we think we want. But when you sit down with one of those IT folks, they're like, "Well, we can't yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, but what about this? Or let's think about this because really what we can do in our system is this. We can't exactly do that, or that's not a thing. This is really what you're looking for. So I had a kid that was well, I placed him. He started, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago at a company. He's been doing a lot of work with he does a lot of work with technology within manufacturing, which seems pretty cut and dry. I mean, manufacturing's got some pretty thin guardrails and it's got some real restrictive things that you can and can't do. So you would think that that would lend itself pretty easily to being displaced by AI. And he said to me right after I placed me, he said, "Steve, Everybody's telling me AI is coming for my job, and I don't doubt it. AI could probably do my job as it stands today. The reason why I'm not worried about AI is because every time I spend 80 to 90% of my time, every time I sit down with somebody that needs something from me on the business side, they don't know what's possible with IT. They don't really know what they're really asking. So we spend our time sculpting their ask. And with AI, it's like a calculator, it's like an outsourced firm, whatever. You have to ask the a question and it can answer that question. So you got to know what you're asking. You got to know exactly what you want going into it. If you don't know what you want going into it, you can't ask the right question. You're asking the wrong question. And it's not stupid AI, right? Because it came to the wrong answer. It's us. We didn't ask the right question.
I do that all the time. In fact, yesterday I asked AI to write an intro for me on something I was working on, and it sent me back some good ideas, and I even rephrased it. Nothing. I could not get it. It only knows what it knows, right?
It knows what it knows, and the prompt has to be perfect.
Yeah, but I took the information it gave me and I created my own intro, which I needed to anyway. I needed my own voice in it, but at the same time, I think that based on what you're saying, there are so many opportunities, especially for customers facing roles. Because think about it, recruiters are customer facing people. Our roles are customer facing now. Now, they have been kind of hidden a bit behind computer screens using job boards, LinkedIn to connect with candidates, to connect with your business managers and whatnot. Now, I mean, you still may have some of that as well because of video conferencing, but you still have the opportunity, though, to work more with those business partners. And a recruiter who has been supporting IT or any kind of technical roles that can fit into that realm of that customer interfacing part, there's some natural transition there.
Well, let me you just got my head going in a kind of different direction from talent acquisition, right? From what you and I do, right? Because some people companies are trying to do what we do with AI, right? What people will ask me or what they'll say to me is, what are some of the things or what is one thing? I got asked this question once. What's the thing that a company or external firm that would potentially hire you overestimates about what you do? I said, what they overestimate? They overestimate that we find the best talent. Now, I maybe I'll get 10% more people to answer than they will, right? Because of the people I know. You, me, everybody, the company, we have access to 90% of the same people with LinkedIn. So identification is not the issue. I don't find that person. Denise doesn't find that person. Denise qualifies them. Denise gets a relationship with that person. Denise understands their drivers. She understands their personality, what company's gonna work. She understands their hot buttons on their compensation, on their hybrid, their ability to hybrid, their ability not to be hybrid, all that stuff. So when you're a 26-year-old kid or 25-year-old kid internally using AI to identify the same people Denise is gonna call, and then I call it the work in the middle. They find the person up front and then at the end, they think dropping an offer in their lap is gonna solve that problem. They didn't do any of the work in the middle. And when they get 4 offers turned down, they're wondering, "What did I do wrong?" You didn't do any of the work in the middle. So, we don't find the best person. We find the person, right? That's gonna work, and we check all the way along the way. Every milestone, every interview, before and after, we're talking to that person. "How you doing? How we doing? What are we thinking? Any questions I gotta get in? Is the personality there that we thought was there? We've been doing this a million years. We know what's gonna fit." So, we don't find we don't find the purple squirrel, as they say. We know how to qualify that. We do develop that purple squirrel. So anyway, I just had to say all that because as we're talking about AI and we're talking about talent acquisition and we're talking about what you and I do, I just think it's a glaring hole that gets left out. And I guess maybe I'm underestimating on one side what we do, but overestimating. And then the most underestimated part of what we do, if I just overestimated that we don't find the right person, what's underestimated about what we do is the work in the middle. They think the work in the middle. I had a role I filled this role about a year and a half ago, and it was for an analytics role, and I got the everything was done. I worked on it for 2 months, and this kid was this 20 maybe he was 25? I don't even think he was 25. He was gonna extend the offer. It was at a $4 billion company. He was gonna extend the offer for me. I said, Let me ask you," and I worked on this hard, I mean, really hard. I said, "What's the offer? I won't extend it. Just So I said, "Give me 2 days." So I had to do my whole I have a process. You have a process. We all have our process. We know how to ride our own bike. We all ride our own bike differently. So I'm riding my bike for 2 days. I'm getting this woman ready. Da, 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 da. I got her to the point where, okay, now this kid's gonna call you. Act surprised. He's gonna give you this offer. Accept on the spot. You wanna get it off the market. So she accepted, and he was shocked, right? So I called the hiring manager and I said, "Hey, she accepted. Okay, cool. Let's get on a Zoom." He and I get on a Zoom. He puts his face right up against the camera. He goes, "I've been waiting 19 months to hear that." I go, "19 months? I just worked on it 2.5. What happened?" So imagine if I let this kid blow that up again.
I had that happen last year with a client. We had some positions we were working on, and the internal recruiter extended 3 offers and did not even let me know that they were gonna extend the offers. And then they didn't invite the candidates, uh, to the location, which would have required relocation. They didn't invite them up there to check out the area. They didn't set up any on-site meetings to meet the hiring team. They didn't set up a real estate person to take them around the area. No whining and dining, nothing. Just gave them the straight offers, and all 3 of them turned down the offers. I was livid.
Right.
And I said, "This isn't how we do this
Tell
in
me
this
what.
business." So that part in the middle is huge.
It's huge. And when you and I build that relationship, and then I get a call 3 months later from XYZ company, "Stop talking to our people." The only reason you have those people is because 'cause they're my friends now. I go to lunch with them. I know them. They trust me. They trusted me, and that's why they're there. I had an instance the beginning of December 2010. These 4 placements I was working on in one company. I mean, months, 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 months. December 1st, they don't tell me they're going to an RPO. RPO calls me. Yeah. RPO calls me. "Let's talk about these 4 candidates. I just spoke to 2 of them. We're not even considering them anymore." I'm like, "What?" And there's one guy who was gonna accept the offer. He was going away on vacation December 10th to Germany, coming back on the 1st. "We need him here on the 11th." I go, "He's leaving on the 10th." Then we're pulling the offer. "Well, you extended the offer." Yeah. So 4 candidates in 1 day.
Wow.
Boom, done.
I know. I noticed that you kind of wonder, how long will the RPO last?
They weren't there long, but it sure made an impact on me.
Yep, I was gonna say I had a big med device company years ago who had been working with us for a long time, and they had merged with another med device company, and in doing so, they had to take on one of the big RPO companies out of Europe. And so they had canceled everybody else's contracts that had been supporting them because they had to work exclusively with this RPO. So what happens is 4 months later, I get a call asking for some information about a search or some searches that we had done previously. And so I asked the woman who contacted me, I said, "So what's going on?" She said, "Well, we need a plan B. We need to bring you guys back because this isn't working." And so they brought us back. And so I've always wondered who's making the decisions? You talked about that earlier too today. Decision makers. Yeah.
Procurement.
Yeah.
They look at the dollars, whatever that number is that's next to the Swan Group. We need to make that smaller. Well, let's talk about what the ROI was on that. What did we save? How many interviews did we cut down on? Otherwise, your people would have spent 19 months interviewing for that role. How much lost business? The role that I filled after 19 months that I just told you about, the CEO was in the VP's. The CEO of a $4 billion company was in the VP's office every Tuesday asking him about that role. It took, so if it was open 19 months and I worked on it, say 3 months, 16 months for them to call me to work on it. Like, I don't understand. They're not looking at the overall business picture. Let's go through the business. What it costs to interview people. What the cost of a mishire would be.
What does it cost your company to not have that person on board?
Yeah, the missed business opportunities, right? So that doesn't go into the calculation. It's just that fee that's next to us, and that's too bad.
Well, I think going back though to some of the obsolete roles that'll roll out from working more with AI and utilizing AI's capabilities for some of the jobs we're talking about, especially on the IT side. Again, because IT encompasses every organization or yeah, every organization, every industry too. But looking at some of the people that we can place into those roles, and that's going to be the next big thing, is being able to work with and partner well with your business and your leaders to make them understand, hey, we're going to start bringing people in who have the skills. They don't have the IT skills, but they have these other pieces, these other skills, and we want them to be included in interviews because we need to start transitioning people internally in the organization. So it's going to be, and I think it's, and you mentioned customer service, you mentioned marketing, Marcom, marketing communications. All of those businesses are going to need, if they're gonna need to staff up, they need to look at who else in the organization, who what other roles are gonna be obsolete, and who of those people that could be potentially losing their jobs could fit into some of these other roles, especially customer-facing roles, because what we do is a customer-facing role.
100%, 100%. And they have to I've always, again, my I'm gonna go back to my daughter. She just graduated from school this year from a computer science school, college within a university, and she got a data science degree, right? She never wanted to be a programmer. She was never strong at it, so that's why this Bionic program is perfect for her. But a lot of the folks that are involved with all this, I always tell them, and I saw it when we started outsourcing stuff as a country, I guess, if you will, 15, 20 years ago. The ones that weren't getting outsourced I would always say 50% business, 50% technical, 70% business, 30% technical. So I always told my daughter, since you don't want to be a coder, that's totally fine. Get embedded with the business, understand the business problems, and you can solve those or talk to them about their business problems. And then you can solve it with your technology, which is what she's doing now. And that's getting more amplified, it seems to me, every day based on what's going on in the marketplace. It's taken 15, 20 years to get here, especially with AI. We're really pushing AI and it's becoming really super smart. Now we just gotta have the person in the middle that can bring that together.
Well, and there's gonna be other roles as well. I went to a conference not too long ago, an electronics conference, and a few people that I met had mentioned that for every role that's automated, because there was so much automation there. It was just mind-blowing. It was really quite amazing to see all of these machines working and, oh my gosh, just all the robotics and whatnot. But one guy in particular, he was standing next to this one area of automation that was new for their industry, and he said, "Yeah, all this is new, and this is what it's gonna do," and he said, and I asked him, I said, "Well, how many jobs would this replace?" And he said, "It's gonna replace about 5." He said, "But it's also gonna create about 15." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Because for every person's role who goes away that's been doing this automation or doing this work, and now it's automated, is we need field people, we need applications people, we need business people, we need maintenance, we need operations people." He said, "There's a lot that goes into operating these machines. They don't just run by themselves." So, yeah. So yeah.
A good friend of mine who's a CIO of about a $2 billion company. We talk about this a lot, and he said that his firms tend to be owned by private equity. And private equity, as we all know, is real focused on return on investment or EBITDA, right? What kind of value is everything? So, an IT guy, as a technologist, he won't hire anybody unless you're walking down the hall, you don't know who's going to bump into you and ask you the ROI on something or the EBITDA on something. So you better be able to talk about that, even as an IT person, right? Otherwise, he can't hire you. So he agrees, right, that it's the programming, the Marcom, the customer service, but he said, and that's where the ROI is gonna keep compounding on itself with this AI stuff. He said, if a department comes to me, I don't know, contracts, legal, whatever, finance, and they say, "Hey, we're implementing AI and we're gonna get rid of 1 headcount." He says he looks at him and goes, "1 headcount? You're not getting me excited. I mean, there's no ROI there. Let's scale this thing to in some of these other areas. That's where we're gonna get some ROI on this thing." But to your point, you're gonna need the business, the hybrid person, however you raise that person, the business partner, the business relationship manager.
I love that hybrid people. Yeah, the in the middle. Yeah, the middle of the sandwich.
100%. And like your friend, the train, she picked her spot and she did good
Yeah,
stuff, you know?
she did.
Yeah.
I guess the messaging here is look to see what's out there. I mean, there are some new things coming around the corner here with some new opportunities, and I hadn't even thought about IT until we spoke. I thought, wow, that's a great conversation.
Yeah, you will. it was funny, and I'm just gonna say this to your audience. So you and I are talking. I hadn't said this to you before, so you're like, what the heck's he about to say?" So you and I were talking, we were talking about stuff, and quite frankly, I was putting you to sleep, right? Because I was talking about IT. And then I said something, and then once I said "bionic employee," boom, you lit up. You lit up, and you were ready to go. You're
Yeah,
like, "Let's
bionic
go,"
employee, I
right?
love it,
So
I love it.
before I
You
said
that's gonna catch on, that, right? That term, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't make it up. So one of my CIOs said he didn't even make it up. He said he read it somewhere. So I'm stealing it, and he stole it, and da 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 da.
Wow. Well, good for you, though, too, for all the new business you're getting. I mean, so that's an indicator right there to our community that,
I agree. So can I ask you a question?
sure.
Okay. At the end of my podcast, I always ask folks, and I want your crew to hear this, right? And I want your because maybe your crew won't come to my see my podcast. So one of the things I always ask folks at the end of my podcast, which gives sort of a personal feel to the listeners, I like live music. I go and see live music. My wife and I go and see live music and concerts and stuff, right? So I was like asking folks that I talk to what their favorite band was that they ever saw live. So I'm throwing that at you. Do you ever go to see concerts?
Oh, are you kidding? I was a groupie. I love concerts. Oh, yeah.
Really?
I grew up in the '70s.
What was your favorite? What was your favorite?
I had so
Favorite one you ever
many.
saw?
I had so many favorites. Chicago
Really?
was one of my favorites. Steve Miller Band.
Ah,
You know, and I think
he
about the good
never heard of
performers.
yeah, yeah.
ELO was
Yeah,
a
well,
great band.
back in the yeah, because
Yeah.
he was traveling around, had
Pink
whatever.
Floyd, I saw Pink Floyd, I saw
I
David
never
Bowie.
saw them.
David
Yeah, I
Bowie did
saw
a
him
great
several
show.
times. Yeah,
Billy
yeah.
Joel does an amazing or
Yeah, we
did,
just saw
I don't know
him
if he's
last year.
yeah. So, well, it's interesting because some of these big performers used to come to the Arizona State Fair every year.
I
And
bet.
yeah, and you could get into the concert for the price of admission to the fair. And that's how it
Oh,
used to be.
really?
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. And
They just paid him
I
a little
couldn't
bit.
tell you who the groups are that are performing now, but yeah. I mean, we saw Alan Jackson there. I mean, he was
I don't even
great.
know who that is. Who's
Alan
Alan Jackson?
Jackson's country western.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Reba
Oh,
McEntire and Vince Gill. I
that
mean,
I know.
I
Yeah,
my
that I know.
interest in music goes yeah, extends far, far and wide.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's why I like asking that because now your listeners have a little more,
Of
food
who
to
I
eat.
am. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
don't
I was a
know.
former groupie.
Yeah, well, yeah, but that's yeah, yeah, however you wanna phrase it, right? So,
No,
yeah,
I've
all
always
good.
enjoyed music. Oh, and another great one was Three Dog Night at Grady
I bet that was good.
Gamage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they were
cool. Fun,
fabulous. Yeah, so
fun.
I've been to that's why it's hard to pick because I've been to so many.
Do you still go now? Do you still
Yeah,
go now?
still go to
Oh,
concerts. Yeah. How
yeah,
about
we do.
you? How about you? What did you like?
I'd say my favorite my best concert, right, was probably the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I saw them at Madison Square Garden in 1997, I think it
Great
was.
venue.
Yeah, well, I go there a lot. Yeah, I've seen Pearl Jam there recently a few times. I see we just saw Billy Joel there. We've seen a bunch. We just saw,
Isn't he great?
yeah, 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 yeah. Maggie Rogers, if you ever heard that, we saw her recently. But I'd say my favorite band to see of all time, which I probably saw them 50 or 60 times, probably closer to 60, were the Allman Brothers.
Oh, there you
Um,
go.
yeah, 92 to 2014.
Greg
Saw them when
Allman.
they were at the Beacon Theater in New York City.
Sure.
So they would
Great band.
play anywhere from 6 to 12 nights there, and I'd go several nights. So, but
Well, what a fun
mm,
conversation. I've
yeah,
so
good
enjoyed
stuff.
this. Thank you.
Nice. It
Thanks
was
for
fun.
joining me. And yes, I look
Sure.
forward to being on your podcast next.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.